Philip Igbenegyesu is the apostolic set man and God's visionary for Word Assembly, a mission-oriented ministry with international outreaches and satellite churches in the USA and some cities in Nigeria with a passion for leadership development, social impact, and kingdom relevance. An author, television host, conference speaker, and life coach. He travels widely with a mandate to reach nations, raise leaders, revive ministries, and restore marriages and family values. Aside serving as the President, Central Executive Committee of Word Assembly, he is the President of Philip Igbenegyesu Ministries International, PIMI, President Just Couples, an organization with the mission of restoring, reviving, and renewing marriages and family values. President, Leadership Development Institute, LDI, Executive Director, West Africa Institute for National Transformation, INT, Executive Director, Shape Empowerment Foundation, SEF, Principal Showpace Business Academy, SBA, and CEO, King's Court, LP. He also serves on the board of a few other ministries, co-founder of Launch Pastors and Leaders Network. He earned an LLB in law from the University of Benin, BL from the Nigerian Law School, after which he was admitted to the Nigerian Bar, MBA from the Netherlands Business School, and he has a PhD in Human Resource Development in Regent University, USA. Pastor Philip's overwhelming passion as a transformational apostle is to see people and nations become the best they can be in God. Appointed, anointed, articulate, unassuming, and highly principled, he is a delight to meet and hear as he teaches the word of God with simplicity, clarity, conviction, and great unction. He is married to Olubumi, a co-pastor, and together they are blessed with children. Join us as we meet Pastor Philip and hear him talk about the journey so far. Stay tuned. Good afternoon, once again, Pastor Philip. It's my honor to interview you.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi,
How are you today?
I am fine, thank you.
That's great. So, can you please introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Olubomi Deborah Igbenegyesu. I am the Deputy Senior Pastor of Word Assembly Worldwide, married to Pastor Philip Igbenegyesu. Have 3 children, Joshua, Jochebed, and Joel, then an adopted child, Jessica, who is joining us very soon.
That's nice. Did you plan that? The adopted child, her name starts with J?
Yeah, we didn't plan that, but she came along and she's Jessica. Well, I guess it's also just confirming the fact that, well, she's got sent into our family. So, yeah, that's it.
My name is Oluremi Opaleye. I was born into the family of late Pa Stephen Akanni Opaleye and Madam Florence Moradeyo Opaleye. I was born into a family of 5 children, 3 males and 2 females, and I'm number 2.
My name is Olugbenga Akindele Banjo. Well, I'm from Ogun State, Ijebu area, Ishoyin, Ijebu to be precise. Ishoyin, Ijebu to be precise, really. Okay, my parents are late. My father was Victor Bamidele Banjo, and my mother was Fadeshola Iyabo Banjo, both of them from the same hometown, Ishoyin, Ijebu. I'm the firstborn of the family, the very first of the family.
So we'd like to take this back to the very beginning, to the beginning of times.
All right.
Okay. So you always talk about your grandfather, whose righteousness you're currently enjoying and you're living with. So I want to know, who exactly is this your grandfather? I think everybody's really curious. We just want to know, who exactly is this your grandfather?
Thank you so very much. It's glad to be able to do this interview with you all. Thank you, media guys, for all of these. Excuse my voice. I've been preaching, so it's a bit husky. My paternal grandfather happens to be somebody I never had the privilege of meeting physically, because he was long dead before I was born. It's very interesting. But you know, the ways of the Spirit are very profound. 1994, in the month of April, was a couple of days in that month, mid-April, I was living with a friend of mine by the name of Pastor then David Chukwuma Opene. Incidentally, he's gone to be with the Lord, in his house, number 16 Brown Street, Oshodi, Lagos. And one of those nights, or a couple of nights, I had a series of encounters. And in those encounters, one of the most profound series, I remember after those encounters, I did a series of messages that I titled Breaking the Chains of Evil Inheritance. Those encounters lasted several days. These were personal, direct dealings of the Lord. And one of the most profound of those several days of encountering the Lord was when the Lord said to me, the seed of righteousness planted by your grandfather shall flourish in your time. Very intriguing, because I never met him. I had no knowledge, no clues about him. But by reason of the many dealings I had, I knew this must have been a very interesting fellow. So I traveled then to Benin City from Lagos to meet with my biological father, who was then alive. And it was then when I told him some of the things I saw, he was so shocked. It's like, how could you have ever known those things? I said, there's no way any man could have known those things, but they were revealed. And so I now wanted him to confirm a number of things. And then he was able to take me blow by blow account to reveal a number of things. There are things he didn't speak to, but I could fill in the gap because of my encounters and my knowledge of the ways of the Lord. And so that was who he was. Was a very interesting fellow. When the Anglican missionaries in Benin City, led by Reverend Payne, that's a very popular Anglican missionary that people that hail from that part of the country would know of, because there's a primary school built in his honor called Reverend Payne Primary School in a very strategic place in the city of Benin. Now, he was the one that led a mission trip to then my paternal village and called Evoneka. That's just before NIFO. NIFO is quite popular. That's the Nigerian Institute for Oil and Palm Research, NIFO. And my paternal grandfather gave his life to Christ, number one, requested that his name be changed. Then they used to bear the name Igbinovia, which in the Benin language meant I seek refuge from the goddess of the river Ovia. The river Ovia is a bit popular in that part of the country, and it used to be very notorious for many negative things, accidents, vehicles run into it. Anyway, my people then sought a refuge from the god of the river. So the name, then was Igbinovia. At baptism, that was in 1922. He gave his life to Christ, requested to have his name changed from Igbinovia to Igbinijesu, and then also gave a piece of his property for the Anglican Communion to build a church. Guess what? That church is still standing on my grandfather's land. Now, I didn't know any of this until the dealings of the Lord. And many of them were not corroborated by my paternal father. So in summary, that's what it's all about. So I know very experientially that the seed of the righteous has a way of flourishing according to God's word. And I'm so privileged and blessed of the Lord to be a partaker of such a righteous heritage. So that in brief, I hope that was brief enough.
Yeah, that was really brief and insightful.
Yes.
So what of your parents, your mom, your dad?
Okay. My mom and my dad, by the time I came to the age of reckoning, were all involved in idol worship. So you want to ask, so what happened in the intervening period?
Yes.
I don't have all the details. All I know is that by the time I came to the age of reckoning, everybody in my own direct family were involved in idol worship. As a matter of fact, I was born into that experience. And early as a child, or as, all of us as kids, because my parents had a lot of kids. My mom had 11 children. My dad had 2 others from 2 other sources. So it was quite a pretty big family. In idolatry, we were involved in worshiping the god of iron, they called it then, or still very little, but anyway, fast forward, both my mom and my dad, by virtue and the ventures of myself and my immediate older brother, eventually gave their lives to Christ. And I'm glad to report that over the years, we've seen practically everybody turn from idolatry into Christ, and even to the extended family. So the prophecy and the word of the Lord, that the seed of righteousness will flourish. Yeah. I don't know if I will claim to be the first fruit of the Christian faith in my family, but I do know from my paternal side, very significantly, I'm the one doing what you might want to call credible, visible, impactful work for the kingdom. So by virtue of that, through the line, we've seen a number of people come to the saving knowledge of Jesus, for which we are very grateful. So that in brief, so I didn't get my Christian foundation from my biological parents, no. Okay. Rather, they looked up to me to be inspired to come into the faith. That happened through another experience, which I don't know if you want to hear about that, but talking about my parents, that's exactly what was their case with respect to their Christian journey. They met the Lord much, much later in life.
Wow, that's really amazing. So you mentioned that you have 11 siblings from your mom's
10 siblings plus me, making 11.
Okay, that's 11.
Yes.
So you're number what, sir?
Number 10.
Number 10. So you just
last but one.
That's really, really amazing.
Isn't it amazing why God comes to a family and goes for number 10? You can't understand the ways of God.
Yes,
yeah, it doesn't add up.
So in what family were you born?
I was born 54 years ago to Pastor Mr. Victor Bamidele Banjo and Mrs. Victoria Fadishola Banjo. I was born in Lagos State, Nigeria, and I was born alongside. I grew up alongside with 3 other siblings of mine. I'm the only daughter of my mom, and that's it.
Were you born into a Christian family?
Yes, Christian family. Yes, I was born into a Christian family, but maybe I should call it a kind of nominal Christian family. We knew the do's and the don'ts of Christianity, so we're given those instructions from the get-go: the things not to do, the things to do, the things that please God, the things that didn't please God, and that was how I grew.
Wonderful.
Well, my growing up, for me, it was a roller coaster of an experience because, growing up, my mom, because of her profession, was not always around with us. In those days, I don't understand the kind of the way government used to transfer their staff. After 2 months, my mom is in another place. After 3 months, 5 months at times, being transferred from one place to the other. So she was not always around with us. So being always with my father, at the beginning, always with my dad, it got to a point I had to be moving around with my mom. My 2 younger sisters at that time, they were living with my aunt. And then my elder brother was living with my dad. So we were just scattered like that until it got to a point, because of the incessant movement, it was affecting my education. So I had to insist that if you don't take me to a place where I will be stable, I am not going to school again. So that persuaded my mom to bring me to Oshogbo, where my dad was living, and then I had to stay with my dad. But it was not as fun as while I was staying with my mom. The liberty of staying with my mom was cut off. So staying with my dad, it for me at that early stage was not a beautiful experience because he was a tough man. He was a disciplinarian, and then I didn't have that kind of close interaction that I used to have with my mom with him. So it was, for me, it was not the best of experience at growing up. But to the glory of God, as we matured, I could relate better with him than when I was younger.
My growing up was a bit challenging. I remember I was spending a few years with my parents in the north. I was born in Kano State. I lived there until, my parents had issues in their marriage and they were separated. And then myself and my siblings were taken to Ogun State to go and stay with my grandparents. That's in Ishoin. That was basically where I did my secondary school education, and before living there, before going back to Kano for my A levels, and then finally coming down southwest for my university education. So that was my upbringing. I stayed more. The most I can remember of my childhood is the one I spent with my grandparents, especially my grandmother in Ishoin.
So growing up,
Yes.
you grew up in Benin.
Yes, in Benin most of my life. Yeah.
How was your education background? Did you have the privilege to study in school?
Very well, very well. Growing up in Benin was quite an interesting family, an experience. My father made it very clear that education remained the best legacy. As a matter of fact, I tell the story often of how he would say to those of us who were playing away with our education that, listen, there is no property for you if you like play away your life. Those words resounded or resonated very deeply. And the kind of, amongst many other things, especially the inspiration we got from church as little kids in Sunday school, encouraged our love for education. So my primary was in a school formerly called St. David's Anglican Primary School, but later named after a Benin Princess, Olua Primary School, then to Egosa Grammar School, and from there to the University of Benin, all in Benin City. Yes. So in the early education, my first degree and all the others happened in Benin.
So
As a matter of fact, what took me out of Benin was the need to come to law school. That's how the journey to Lagos that never made me go back started. Yes.
So he said that you, it's perceived you attended the best of the best schools in Benin.
I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, maybe if we define the parameters for judging the best schools, but by no means would I say the primary school was top. No, there were more elitist schools that people attended who were not from a well-to-do family. I used to describe it as rough and tumble, quite lowly. The experience wasn't an experience of abundance. It was an experience of just enough to get by. And education was very paramount, So primary, secondary, and then university. I do believe then that UniBen was one of the best in the country, not because I went there, and the experience of JAMB. JAMB used to be one of the easiest way then. I don't know about now, things have really gone south. In determining the pursuit of scholarship in the school. In my year, 1986, when I gained admission to read law, the cutoff point to read law that year was 286. I still have a friend who made 280 and was not admitted. He made 280. So just compared to what is happening now, I don't understand what's happening to our education. That's a story for another day. But the point is, it was very competitive to go into UniBen then, and I was so blessed to be in the first batch, having scored higher than that, 293 to be precise, to to gain admission to read law in University of Benin. Yes.
That's really amazing. I can imagine the work you had to put in.
Yes, it was a lot. Oh no, I mean, I regale those stories once in a while. We're burning a midnight candle, we run to the library in the daytime, attend UME, JAM classes, read. I tell you what, just one funny story. I didn't have the money to buy the literature books and some of the textbooks because I did government as part of my choices. And so what I would do, I made a habit of borrowing from my friends the book. I read it back to back, cover to cover, summarize it, give them their book, and teach them how to do their book. So it was quite an experience. There was a lot of rigor of scholarship and study. And I'm glad because those discipline of studying through the night has marked me till date. That's how I'm able to catch up with the many speaking, teaching, training, and scholarship endeavors I've undertaken over the years. Yes.
When did you give your life to Christ?
I gave my life to Christ, I believe, in 1989, back there in the north where I was schooling in my secondary school. I gave birth, but you know how it is. I gave my life to Christ, but I would say I became very serious with the Lord in 1990 when I eventually left school. But before then, I was always, a lover of Jesus, one that just loves to do the right things, go the right way, serve God. But the real born again experience that lasted me this long was in 1990.
Well, like I said, my primary school days, when I started from primary 1, there was this movement around with my mom, and then when at a point I went to stay with my dad. So I was the school I could remember that I continued my primary education from was St. Benedict Primary School, Shobo. And from there, I went to what they used to call in those days modern school for 1 year. Then from modern school, I went to secondary school, Oshogbo Grammar School. Moving around didn't translate to more money in those days. In fact, it's more stress. So the family was not actually a family of affluence, of affluence. It was a medium class family. I will not say we were rich, and I will not say we were poor. We had our basic needs met, but it could have been better. We were always wishing that we had much more than that as children, but definitely looking back today, I can see that at least we have the basic requirements for life while growing up.
The one I can remember very well was between the last two. Well, my mother had 4 of us, so my father, I'm the first, followed by my sister, and followed by 2 other boys. The one I can remember was between the last two, but the third and the fourth born were very, very, they were very, very tough, especially the last born, who was not ready to give as much respect and regard to the third born. So it caused a lot of frictions. They were always quarreling and fighting and all of that. But we found ways through it. We were able to advise, and counsel them. And of course, one of them schooled away from home, was always, most of the time was not at home. So that helped to douse the tension at home. Yeah. Like I said, I did most of my primary education in the north, in Kano State. I still remember my primary school, Ijeoma Memorial Nursery and Primary School in Kano State. I did most of my primary education there. And then I think I was in St. Thomas Primary School also for about a year or thereabout before I was taken to Ishon Ijebu, my hometown, for my primary 6 and secondary education. I did my primary school education at Emmanuel Anglican Primary School in Ishoin, and also my secondary education at Ishoin Grammar School in my hometown. So those were the places I schooled. I think I enjoyed my time at in secondary school. I can't remember so much of what happened at Ijoma Memorial College, Ijoma Memorial Primary School. I can't remember so much of what happened, but I think it was an interesting time too.
Really amazing. So growing up as a young kid in Benin,
Yes.
yeah, I'm sure you had a lot of dreams. Like when I was young, my
Yes.
dream was to be a medical doctor, but that dream is far from me right now. So what exactly was your dream of the future while growing up?
Like every young man growing up, the dream started with you need to make money. But as you grew older, you began to define the instrument, the channel through which you want to do that. I pursued law by choice because very early in life, I can't tell where the fascination came from sincerely. But I do know from my sixth level, primary six, I made up my mind I was going to be a lawyer, primary six. And I really wanted to practice. I remember back in school, I used to head the moot and mock trial team of Uniben. And all the competitions we went to, we came top. And I was the leader of the team. So I was really looking forward to practicing the law. I remember meeting a justice then who said, young man, I'm going to be watching out for you in the High Courts of Benin. One Justice Joan Iweriogene, I think she's passed now. So that was my aspiration, ambition. That was my sincere vocational pursuit. But I'm glad that today I'm doing something much better.
That's a lot. But if you were to still be a lawyer,
Yes.
how far did you see yourself getting?
As far as anybody could get. I have my colleagues who are senior advocates of Nigeria right now that we're called to the bar together. I have about 3 of them who are senior advocates of Nigeria. And very good. They are very good. And many more are very good. My aspiration would have been to get to the zenith of the profession. I had a desire to get my PhD then at 25. Okay. Yes, because I graduated pretty early. I wanted to get a doctorate at 25. I wanted to pursue to become a son. I wanted to be one of the most notable advocates and all of that. And of course, make a lot of money. But along the line, when the call, came, all those things became not as important as pursuing and giving credence to the call of God upon my life. Yes. So those were the aspirations. The aspiration was basically to do well in my choice profession, which is the practice of the law.
Yeah.
So I was going to major in as an advocate, not as a solicitor.
Okay. So how did you now cope with the redirection from God to venture into ministry?
It was very easy. There was no coping needed. It was with so much joy. And the reason was that I already had a foundation in Christ. I was already a dedicated believer. In my secondary school, I haven't met the Lord. I started from social prefect and ended up as chapel prefect. So I was already leading the chapel service. In secondary school, I became the vice president of the Young Christian Association, YCA. So in that second, I was leading. In the university, we started a fellowship then in the University of Benin. We didn't join any of the bigger group. We call it SCF, Student Fellowship, Student Christian Fellowship, SCF. But of course, long after we left, that fellowship didn't continue. I led that, and of course, on campus, I was going from campus to my local church in Benin City and pastoring a village church. As a matter of fact, for 4 years as an undergraduate of law, I pastored a village church for 4 years. I remember missing service only 2 times for 4 years. So when the clarity and the conviction about the call came. It was a natural, transition. There was no sense of loss, no sense of regret, but rather the sense of the privilege, knowing that the call is a high honor, and the call was apostolic in the sense that God was asking us to blaze a trail, to start something new, and all of that. So, talking about coping, there was no coping required. Rather, it was a matter of grace. I don't recollect, though, that my biological dad, said to me then, "You are too young. Why not go practice? As you get older, in fact, after retirement, the work of God will never run away. You can start pastoring there." So can you imagine if I wanted to wait till now to start pastoring? I wouldn't have known any of you that are here today. So that's it.
How was growing up like?
Okay. Growing up was a little bit challenging because I grew up in a polygamous home, and so I had other stepmothers. So growing up was not too interesting, if you may. I don't because I grew up having half sisters, half brothers, and not having that normal family lifestyle that I ought to have had with my father and my mother. And so, I wouldn't say growing up was too bad, because in the midst of it, in the midst of all the challenges and the struggles, I met Jesus. So at some point, I began to enjoy growing up, but growing up was really a little bit challenging. I'll put it that way.
Would you say that what would you change about your life and how you grew up?
I don't know if the word is to change something, but maybe it would be, maybe I would have known God earlier. If I had known God earlier, maybe the struggles I had growing up, maybe I would have been able to cope through it. But I would say the struggles I had growing up was made me struggle a little bit growing up. Made me feel sad, frustrated many times. But I would have loved to change if I would have loved to know God earlier, and maybe I also would have trusted God to confront issues with my parents earlier when I was a child. But kids grow up in different ways, and so I thank God for everything ultimately.
I am grateful to God for my parents because I learned some Christian virtues and values from them growing up. I remember that growing up then, even though they were merely religious, there was nothing like missing morning devotion. It was a daily thing. And some of the prayers that my parents used to pray for us children those years, I am sure that that's the reason why all of us in my family, our marital life, I think God has helped us. Because from when we were babies, children, they used to pray about our marital experiences. At morning devotion, it used to be very funny to me. Why will you be praying for children in primary school for marriage? So it was like that. And we never missed a Sunday service. And then from there, that's, train up a child in the way it should go actually became real to me. Because growing up, there is nothing that is as consistent that we do than going to church. But as I grew up, I discovered that my parents were just merely religious. They didn't have the true knowledge of Christ. It took me getting born again later in life to now insist before God that my parents will have more knowledge of Him. And it actually came to pass.
I would say at a point, I would say they were both very comfortable. My father was doing very well in his career as an auditor. He was with the Federal Audit Department of Nigeria. He worked with the Federal Audit Department of Nigeria, and perhaps the most senior person in the north, in the northern part of the country with respect to that particular arm of government, that is the audit. So he was good. He was doing good. He was doing business at the side and living very well to a large extent, at least at the point, the one I can remember, until he had some challenges in his life, and he had to leave his work, and business was not working fine and all of that. My mother also had a good job. She was working as a permanent secretary to the managing director of the biggest breweries in the northern breweries of Nigeria. She was the permanent secretary to the managing director, doing very well, even though, like I said, they were living apart, most of the time, most of the ones I can remember, but they were quite comfortable at this point, for quite a number of years. They rose in their careers until some challenges came that began to affect them. That's what I would say. No, neither of them was born again at that time. My mother much later gave her life to Christ and was really zealous and enthusiastic and about the things of God. My father, I really don't know exactly what to say, but I know that we tried to preach to him. My sister in particular reached out to him in a number of occasions and all of that. What eventually happened of that is what we don't know, whether he truly, accepted Christ, and all of that. But I know that my mom gave her life to Christ, served the Lord, was even ordained in the church and all of that. So that's what I would say about that.
So I would like to know, when and where did you get born again?
Thank you so very much. I claim 1982 as my salvation encounter experience. I was in church a little bit earlier. We had a school bursar, as they were called then. A bursar is like person in charge of the bursary, the accounts of a school. And then he had an official accommodation just right across from my paternal home where I grew up. And his kids were of age mate with myself and my immediate older brother. And so we were invited to the local church that then became our family church for several years, called Christian Gospel Church. Founded, it was founded by his father, late Apostle Omogbai George. But his son took over, Reverend Olu George, when I came into the church, and he really radically transformed the church. The church was very popular in the days then because the pastor was a highly sought after public commentator and speaker. Reverend Olu George was his name. And so I'd been a part of that. So Sunday school were being, led to the Lord, were being spoken to and all of that. But my salvation encounter was in April 1982. I was in school, and we had some people come and they showed this film called Born in Hell. Those of you younger people probably never met that movie, but those here who are much older know about the movie. They showed it in our school auditorium that day before they could say who wants to give their life to Christ. I guess I should have been the first or second person to come out that day, because I knew that hell couldn't be my portion. I claimed that day as my salvation experience because I was invited. We were all invited to the altar, made the sinner's prayer, make commitment, on the new walk and the new reality with the Lord, and that began my journey from then till now.
Nice, amazing. So, who were your friends then, and how many of them do you still relate with? Yes.
My friends, as of when I gave my life to Christ?
Yes, as of when you gave your life to Christ, or your younger days.
I don't think I recollect anybody that go far back with me to the days I was in primary school. There's a platform called EGOSA, Old Boys Association. So I'm an acquaintance with many of them because they were colleagues of mine in secondary school. But I am not particularly very close to any. Not because there are no incredible people there, but because life, work, family, demands have thrown us far apart over the years. And so when we do recollect or reconnect, yeah, we're exchanging all the pleasantries, and revel in all the memories of the past, but not really that close. For instance, in my local church that I joined when I came into Lagos from law school, practically all the pastors there I'm still very much in touch. We're still very much in touch. We connect, we relate, and all of that. So that's it. The past, many of them are no longer that close. But in the past, after those experiences, till date, we have people that we are still very chummy with.
So, going back to your salvation story, what made you make this decision for Christ? What's your salvation story?
Well, my salvation story is interesting. Like I said, I gave my life to Christ initially in 1989, or maybe even earlier than that, when I schooled in the northern part of Nigeria, and when people preach to you about Christ, and Christ got to you in such a way that you give your life to Christ and you accept Jesus as your Lord and personal Savior. For us then, it was really a very serious matter. I mean, you walk with God in such an amazing way, in such a sincere way. There was no hanky-panky about you serving God. There was no hidden agenda. You focused on God and loved Him totally. So that was it. I just got to know God. Of course, when I said I wasn't really, I didn't really gave my life to Christ. I didn't really serve God the way I ought to serve God from 1989. It didn't mean that I went back to sin, but some of those things like not being consistent with God, not praying as you ought to. For us then, it was like, you weren't really, really born again. But from 1990, it was like Jesus or nothing else. I mean, it was straightforward. I could not accept anything less than, serving God. I mean, we used to have a slogan then: we don't move from grace to grass. I mean, it's only from grace to grace, not from grace to grass. So from then, I just became an ardent follower of Jesus, and to date, but one of the things that made me give my life to Christ, to properly answer your question, was the fact that I just knew that, this life, I needed something I needed to know God. I needed to understand life. Growing in a polygamous home, I didn't have that love I wanted. So I was most of the time frustrated. And for some reason, the gospel came to many of us in school, and I accepted Jesus, and immediately accepted Him. That peace of mind, joy, excitement in the midst of the trouble came to one. And from then, I just knew that if you have Jesus, you have everything. If you don't have Jesus, you have nothing.
Wow, that is such an amazing story.
It's so funny. when I think back today, then my mom was my, inspiration, because when I see her she happened to be a qualified or a trained midwife. In those years, people go to school to become grade 1 midwives. They go to school of midwifery, which she attended, and she retired as a midwife matron, So when I see her in that white uniform with a cap, all I knew that time all that was around me was that, oh, I want to be a nurse. I want to be a nurse. That was all. So I would say she had the most influence on my life growing up. I saw the way her disposition towards people. I saw her disposition towards the children, how she prioritized us. And so I would say my role model growing up was my mom. It's strange, but that was it. To the best of my understanding then, because we were taken to church, we were born into church, as it were. We were in the Baptist church, all the Sunbeam, the Royal Ambassador, the way you go in the Baptist setup, I was a part of it. And then another thing that I don't know how God did it. Maybe because I was in the Catholic school when it is Lenten period, because nobody fasted in my family. There was nobody. My mom was not fasting. My dad never fasted to my knowledge. But when it's time for the Lenten period, they will announce it in school, and somehow nobody was fasting in my family. I will tell them I want to fast. They will say, okay. And I will fast. I could remember one day that I went through a fast, and that time there's this pipe bomb water that government used to supply into homes. When it comes, we will put a hose and everybody will be fetching into their container, and that rubber hose, it had one leaking point that water will be coming out. I was fasting. I remember I went there. I as a child, I just opened. We used to play with it, open our mouth to the leakage, and I've forgotten that I was fasting. So I put my mouth. When I remember that I was fasting, I was so distressed. Oh, I've broken my fast. And when I was saying that, my brother said, who forced you to fast? Nobody asked you to fast. You are the one fasting. So why are you crying that you have broken your fast? So as a child, I found myself doing some of those things without anybody asking me to do it. So I just believe that it is the predestinate counsel of God that was playing out at that tender age without me knowing it.
Okay. I spent, especially when I was during my university education at University of Lagos, I spent most of my time and my holidays with my cousins here in Lagos around Ketu Alapere, and I used to see their dads as my role model, because that's the first family I was close to that everything seemed normal and okay. Not that they didn't have their challenges and all of that, but they stayed together, they lived together. Their father was responsible for their education. He was available, and even when he traveled, he worked with the customs and all of that. So he used to travel and come, but he was more available in Lagos. So I loved that atmosphere. For me, it was a very good one. It was perhaps the very first healthy family atmosphere that I lived in. So I would say my uncle and my aunt. My aunt was both of them were my role models, especially my uncle, who loved his family and took care of his children, and I was always available for them. I think that was the first person. That's the person I would say was my role model. He wasn't a perfect man, no doubt about that, but he cared about his family. He was available. He trained his children to the best of his knowledge, and he really earned my respect. That's what I would say. Yes, I did. Well, at the initial stage, when I was growing up in Kano State, I would say not really. I can't remember, not really. But when I had to go back to my hometown and for my primary 6 and secondary education, I joined the church. I joined the choir in church. I served in the choir, and I was very, very involved. I was very, very involved. There were just 3 major. My life then revolved around three major areas. Number one, my grandparents, my school, and church. Those are the only three things that I did, and because I loved what I was doing, and in the choir I enjoyed singing and all of those things and so on. So I was always available, and it was fun. It was fun those days as a little boy, a teenage boy growing up. Was very interesting. Always being in church. I went through the confirmation classes. I was confirmed. The bishop came and all of that. It was interesting because that was what was available for us in my hometown at that time, and I think I really enjoyed myself. Especially the part of being involved in church. Okay, I don't know what I will say, but I know that my choir master then, who was an elderly man, even at that time he was a grandfather, but he used to enjoy the part. I think he called it alto. He used to enjoy the way I sang some parts on it, and he would tell me he was also the organist, and he would shout from where he was, "Oshe, Oshe, thank you," when he heard my voice. So Oshe, Oshe, meaning thank you. And so that really encouraged me. It really boosted my interest in singing in the choir, and I think today, looking back, he played a very interesting role in my being able to recognize what we call good music, and maybe tones and keys and all of that. I don't know all the keys by their names, but I know how to join a song and without changing, without giving the keyboardist problems, having to change his key and all of those things. No, I think I had a good foundation in that. So, but he used to say my alto was very, very good. I think that was what I would say.